ecosystem is that's the only thing I use. So let us give you some examples. So under the category of unique value, a good example of that would be Amazon Video, Netflix, Hulu, Disney. Most people have more than one streaming service.
And a lot of people sign up for them. Like I got Disney because I wanted to watch The Mandalorian. They had something that only they had, something unique to them.
Yeah.
And that's why you have them. But they're affordable, and there's an and. Most people have a few of these.
Did you like how The Mandalorian ended?
Yeah, I think it's going okay.
Yeah, me too. I enjoyed it.
Baby Yoda, I mean, you can't get better than that.
No, you can't get better than that. Yeah, so that's right. So unique is I can only get this here. But it may not be the only one like that you have. When you go to mutually exclusive, again, a good example of this would be Amazon Prime, right? Amazon Prime, I pay my, $120 or whatever it is
129,
currently?
I think, currently, yeah.
Uh-oh, it went up on me.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. But I don't have another service. I don't know about, do you? I don't have another free shipping service that I pay a subscription to.
It's so common that people like choose Amazon Prime, right? And they have it, they call it a thing called showrooming. People go into stores, they look at stuff, and then they just buy it on Amazon because they can have it shipped to their house for free. But why would you need two free all-inclusive packages like that?
It's the challenge that barnesandnoble.com has, right? And that is, if you go to Barnes and Noble, man, you can tell they celebrate books, right? They love books. And it feels like you've walked into a virtual bookstore, right? The challenge is when you go to the checkout line, there's this thing called shipping.
Right.
And again, they don't have a subscription for shipping. And I wonder how many people would experience the shopping of Barnes & Noble and then just flick over and in 2 clicks buy it with no additional shipping charge, right?
Right.
Yeah. And by the way, Android phone, iPhone, again, you rarely have both. Why would you have both unless one was your burner phone? Do you have a burner phone?
No.
Yeah, I don't either. But if you had one, you kind of don't need the other, right?
Right. You get attached to that, and that gets dangerously close to the ecosystem. But I like your example of the mobile banking, right? If you're banking with one bank, like you don't need other ones. Like your money is in one place.
Yeah, that's right.
You need one app to access it and move it around.
Right.
So that is definitely like, if you're using my service, the chances that you're using my competitors too goes way down.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And then at some point, that mutual exclusive can move into rare air where it's kind of an ecosystem all on its own, right? And it pretty much, you don't go live in another ecosystem, right? For search, you most likely live in, if you chose Google, then that's where you live. You don't go and use the other search engines, you just
But some people have gone all in. They have Chromebooks, right? They have an Android phone, and they just live in that world, Google Docs completely.
Yeah, that's right.
And some people have done that with Apple, and Amazon's increasingly. Like they're trying to build this all-inclusive package that touches more and more of our lives.
Yeah. I think Amazon, Google, and Apple are perfect examples, easy examples for any of us to understand in terms of what a real ecosystem looks like. I got an Apple phone, I've got my Apple TV, I've got my Apple Watch, I've got my Apple, blah, 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 blah. Yeah.
And the farther you get into that rabbit hole, it's like the more you get sucked down it, right? Because you have more and more switching costs because more and more of your life is built on those rails.
Yeah, so when we think about our industry, the real estate industry, unique is not bothersome. Mutual exclusive is a little bothersome. Ecosystem is really concerning.
Yeah.
That's when you would begin to see a real change, right? In consumer behavior. So if we put all this together and said, okay, so let's take the 3 phases of the future of the real estate ecosystem and kind of think this through. I would put our industry into 3 stages: the pre-transaction, transaction, and post-transaction. And pre-transaction is search and showing, right? Transaction would be contract, mortgage, title, inspection, insurance. Post-transaction would be home maintenance, home improvement. So the conversation that we were having at family reunion was, the latest thing that everyone was up in arms around was showing time being bought by Zillow.
Yeah.
And everyone was going, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, right?
What they were realizing is that one competitor had a pretty big advantage in that one segment of the ecosystem.
Yeah,
Boom.
so we can look at, so if we want to use Zillow as just an example, we can look at that organization in these 3 stages and go, well, they pretty much have everybody who has eyeballs
on their website. I mean, so much so that they get a Saturday Night Live spoof on it, right? So.
Yeah. There's 80-something million households, homeowners, 120 million households, and Zillow claimed they sold 200 million leads.
I know.
So that's interesting in and of itself. But so they basically have search, and they now have showing.
Right.
Okay. So there you go. And if you go to transaction, Dotloop is the contract. They have a mortgage service. They are getting into they just bought into the title business. They just don't have inspection and insurance yet. And we go to post-transaction, and they don't have any of that. So when you think about the march towards an ecosystem, the ecosystem is going to include all of this. It's going to include, I want to buy or sell, I actually transact, and then what happens between my transaction period. The one that's probably the most disconcerting is the one that no one talks about, and that's the far right.
Yeah.
And that is post-transaction. Right now, our industry...
We tend to think of that as downstream. Everybody's been talking about, everybody's swimming upstream to get the lead earlier and earlier. Yeah. That's why search was so important. But one way of looking at home maintenance and home improvement is way upstream. Like that's the 7 to 10 years between transactions. It's a big period of time.
That's right. And our industry probably does as good, if not a lot better than any other industry as it relates to staying in touch with people.
Because we depend on referrals. That's a huge part of our industry, and so we stay in touch.
Yes.
We provide a lot of services outside of the transaction.
Well, we do. What happens, however, when all of a sudden there's a real estate company that's attached to post-transaction services, Jay, in a meaningful way, such that in that 10-year period between the time that they might have bought with you and they sell with you, that someone has worked their way into your referral base's life and has taken over the relationship. And they also have search and showing and contract writing and mortgage and title. One of the challenges that our industry has is, should I use a vendor or not for my services and for my technology?
Right.
And or partnering with mortgage or title. And I can tell you that across the board here, most likely your vendor today is going to be your competitor tomorrow. And
it can happen. It can happen overnight. It happened this week.
Well, it's happened in all of these categories, meaning that the company that your MLS uses for showing you're now sending money to
someone who can compete with you.
Someone who can. The thing I want to be very careful, and I don't want to mischaracterize Zillow. Zillow says their position is, we're not competing. We're simply going to follow the path of the consumer wherever it leads us, and we believe that agents are still needed.
Right.
And that's what Zillow says. The only thing I point out is that they're actually a brokerage. They are. They have brokers' licenses. They now get their MLS feeds the same way the rest of us do, through IDX. So you just got to look at that and go, there is a switch that can be pulled. They say they're not going to pull it. I totally respect that. And my only statement is, you can change your mind tomorrow. And so shame on me if I don't have a backdoor solution.
Yeah.
Right, that protects me.
I can't put all of my eggs in that basket if that basket could be my competitor tomorrow.
Well,
right. So
I'll give you another example. I know there's a top agent in our firm who woke up and his JV partner in the mortgage business got bought. And then just this past week, had a phone call from one of our top people that has a title JV, and they discovered that Compass just bought out their partner. They're now in business. They've been in business for over 12 years. They're now in business with Compass.
So as people try to play the ecosystem game, we're going to see this sort of consolidation, and our vendors, right, could be owned by our competitors. That's something we have to be watching.
It's the reason why we have ventured all in on this right here. It's for only one reason, and that is to protect you, our partners. That's the number one reason why we're doing this, right?
I know for a fact there are some that's like, I don't want to get into that business. I mean, besides that, some of them are stinking expensive to get into and be successful, but it's a necessary evil. Like, if you're going to have an ecosystem, you don't get to pick and choose what parts of it that you are going to provide. Like,
that's it.
The consumer has an expectation. You're going to have to meet it.
That's exactly right, Jay. So if you look at where our industry is going, it's going all the way across here. And it will be game, set, match on an ecosystem when it gets to post-transaction.
Yep.
So this is why Keller Williams became a tech company that would build and own its technology, that it would own the data, right? And I get asked all the time. In fact, Brad Inman asked me, he says, well, why should you own the data? And my answer, though a lot of people don't get, is I actually have contracts with my partners. I have to honor them.
You can't change your mind.
I can't change my mind.
Right.
Yeah. A franchise system is actually elegantly one of the safest places, if not the most safe place, that your data could be held, Jay, because the franchise organizations have legally binding contracts with all their partners. So we're already in a contractual relationship to provide services, and we have rules that we have to abide by. And competing against our partners would be prohibited.
That's right.
Doing anything with
you a bird?
That,
you got no hand.
that might harm them in any way would be a violation of the contract. That's not true of a brokerage. That's not true of an organization that might be in multiple states or all the states, but they're a brokerage. They actually don't have a contract with their agents. And if they do, it's just a simple independent contractor contract. It's not a data contract.
Right.
Yeah. And by the way, those contracts can be changed. The franchise contract is a 30-year ongoing contract. Yeah. It's a little different. It's easier to unwind a marriage than it is to unwind a franchise contract. Yeah. Just to give you an example. So the truth of the matter is that there are organizations, franchise actually being one of the safest, if not the safest, that you could partner with to build your tech, right? We were in business with Dotloop before Zillow bought them. We woke up one day and all of a sudden Zillow had bought Dotloop. And we already had a data agreement in play.
Right.
So Keller Williams was the only real estate company out there that had an agreement that had to be honored when Zillow purchased Dotloop.
Right.
Okay. When the contract came up, part of the negotiations was around who got to own the data. And ultimately, those negotiations left us with no choice
but to move to a different provider.
We did, and DocuSign wasn't 100% ready for that.
Right.
They just weren't, and I'm deeply sorry for the challenges that we've had, and we will continue to work through those, and we will get all that done and fixed. The good news is that DocuSign is not going into your business. We have a contract with them, but they're not going to be a real estate ecosystem, Jay.
This all makes me think of so many times during these vision speech, you remind us we have to be careful that we're not just trying to have a great year, we're trying to have a great career. And when people make short-term decisions that could ultimately harm us or put us out of business, that's really, you're trying to keep the eye on the big picture, this tree. There's a bigger game that's being played. We need to be mindful of that.
Yeah.
And that's how we ultimately can prosper.
Yeah, I don't think I ever have vilified Zillow at all. All I've simply said is they don't have an agreement with us or with you that they won't do something. And when you ask them to give you an agreement to do that, they won't do it. And I understand, I really do.
Yeah.
And I don't say that as criticism. I simply say that as a fact of the relationship. And so that, I don't want to spend all day on this. We got a lot. We have a
lot to cover.
We have a lot to cover. I wish we were here in person so I could ask you, does that make sense? Or is there something that I didn't say? Can I make one other statement?
Yes, sir.
And that is, we went on this journey a couple of years ago, right? Mm-hmm. Way before anybody else. And we innovated at the speed of lightning. And that speed of lightning worked for us for the first year mm-hmm. that we brought out Command, because it was, we didn't have enough users that we couldn't find a bug, fix the bug, and it didn't do as much. So it was easy to find all of that.
Right.
We continued innovating in real time, using the lab process to vote up what we needed to do, what next priority was, and go do that. Well, we found ourselves probably 6 months ago, all of a sudden looking up, and that we started losing that war, meaning that the bugs showed up more, right? This whirling, spiraling death screen, or a blank screen, or whatever else, right? Mm-hmm. And it honestly, it had to do with the speed at which we were innovating and how we were approaching that. So I just want to make a promise to you that we hear you, we understand that. We are horribly sorry that innovation has put us in this spot, but we have now accepted our own 66-day challenge of locking down stabilization, meaning that you're not going to see much from us for the next 66 days in terms of releases. And the reason is because it's all hands on deck. We're now going to go try to stabilize the entire system. And we will stabilize it. Make no mistake about that. We will. We actually have the next version of Consumer sitting on the shelf right now, Jay. The challenge is that this next version is very entwined with Command as we march towards this vision that we have. And because of that, we can't release it yet until we believe that Command is fully stable. Right. Otherwise, the end result could be unpleasant for your clients. So we can't do it.
Right.
So we're 100% committed to stabilization, and that's where we're going.
Well, the ecosystem that you're going to experience over the next 66 days is going to feel different. It's just going to feel different as it gets smoother and better. The bugs are going to go away, mm-hmm. and your confidence in it will go up. I want
to one last thing, and we'll get off this. I want to just talk about data for a second.
Yeah.
And what I want to point out is everyone says you can't have my data. I don't want you to have my data. I'm not sure everyone fully understands or appreciates why you don't want that. And the reason is because it's not the data that you directly give. It's when you combine the data and you begin to see patterns.
Right.
And those patterns then allow you to go back and customize experiences, right? Using AI, by the way, to go and discern a certain pattern, mm-hmm. and then change your services or the experience around that pattern.
Right.
So it's not the data itself. The data is the beginning point.
It's the insights you get from it.
It's the insights you get from it. That's exactly right. And then the experiences and the service that you provide based on what the pattern. So you need a lot of data across a wide swath of experiences in order to then be able to see predictable patterns.
Right.
So that's the whole issue with data. It's nothing more than that. You would want to make sure that whoever has your data has your back.
And it's giving you the insights, not using them against you.
Yeah, and actually, if you could, gives you a competitive advantage.
Right.
If you could get it, right? Yes. Which is why, again, an organization like a franchise organization that has contracts is actually in the best position of all to go be that partner.
Right.
So, all right. So here's an interesting, here's some data for you, right? There are 328 million people in America. That's the population. 128 million households, 83 million homeowners, and 5.6 million homes sold, right? Now that's you'd have to double that for transaction size.
Right.
Yeah. So 84 billion in commissions. Here's the big question. When you wake up in the morning, what are you competing for? Are you going for the 5.6 million homes sold, or are you going after the 83 million homeowners?
Right.
And here's the issue, and that is if we go back and just look at this idea of an ecosystem, right, that where are we headed? when you think about the very end, the post-transaction, what you realize is that if you ignore that piece and you go master this piece, this is transactional. Right. The 5.6 million is all transactional. And so much of the software that's been designed so far in the industry is all transactional. It's about getting the transaction and or doing the transaction. But very little, if any, actually addresses the 83 million homeowners. That's where you lose them. And we're going to look at the data from NAR before we close today, and we're going to see why that 83 million is really important. You do not want to forget those folks.
Well, that's the realtor for life, right? We don't want to just help you sell a house. We want to be your realtor for life.
That's it. That's it. So hopefully maybe that gave you a somewhat of a Christmas tree to hang all of this, because a lot of people were going, oh my gosh, Zillow bought showing time, what's going to happen? Well, I mean, honestly, that's not the issue. The issue is, are you providing are you also in partnership with someone who's building out a competitive service experience for your clients? Mm-hmm. Because here's the truth. The truth is the realtor will decide. So we're going to look again at NAR data, but at the end of this, at the end of the day, if a realtor hands a client or a customer or a buyer seller, right, a end-to-end experience that manages not only the transaction, but then also manages the house with them for that 10-year period, it's game, set, match.
Right.
What the industry is trying to do, here's the bet. I'll end on this note. The bet is, can the organizations that are tech companies, pure tech companies, can they go get the customer faster than the people that have the customer can go get the tech?
Right.
And to be honest with you, I'm betting on the realtor. I'm betting on red, by the way. I'm betting on I'm betting on the fact that we will get there.
Yeah.
We will. A lot going on, but we'll get there. All right, let's switch gears. So when we say vision speech, the reason why we just called it that is that in order to get a sense of where you're going, you should look at where you've come from.
Right.
So in the next hour, what we want to do is kind of walk you through, and a lot of this is you going, I knew that. What we're trying to do is put all this together and hand this to you in such a way that you can literally sit down with your buyers and sellers and be the economic authority of choice, right? Mm-hmm. You can be that economist of choice. You can help give them perspective on what's happening.
We'll highlight it. There's a slide where the newspapers this year are going to be very misleading as they interpret how we moved from last year to this year, and you can be the smart person who's helping them understand what's actually happening in their market.
Yeah, that's right. So let's jump into this. So COVID-19, it happened, right? Yeah, we have 28.3 million cumulative cases. We have total deaths. Yes.
Over 500,000.
Yeah. And total vaccinations so far, just under 50. Just want to make a comment, and that is, according to the news, they now anticipate that they can have as many as 220 million vaccinations, right, doses available by the end of May, by June 1st. That's a lot more than they thought was going to happen. So if you think about here's what the health authorities say, and that is we're shooting for this herd vaccinated
herd immunity.
Yeah, around 70 to 75%. Mm-hmm. And if you have 220 million doses available, remember the data, right? You're really close, right? There's only 320 million people in America, Jay. So if you have 220 million additional doses available with the 49 that you already have, you now have out there in the United States enough to get you to that 70 to 75% herd immunity, if you will.
We got to get the shots out there where people can get them, and then we got to get shots in arms.
Yeah.
Right, which is another logistical challenge. But by the middle of the year, we could truly think about emerging safely from this if another shoe doesn't drop, which is, I think we're all ready for that.
Yes. Well, and it's tough. I mean, this has been a year, and it's been a year of health crisis, economic crisis, civil unrest. I mean, so many business unrest. It's all of that's occurring at once. And a lot of people have differing opinions on, should I wear a mask, should I not wear a mask, should I wash my hands or not wash my hands, should I social distance or not. And you're going to have to make your own decision. What I can say is that until we get enough people vaccinated, we're not going to get a handle on this. And this will continue to create extreme hardships on people, and it will continue to cause unnecessary death.
Right.
Whatever, yeah.
I think what a lot of people are, as you move to Canada, we're looking at, like we've seen that the cases are going down rapidly, but we also have new strains coming out. If we can navigate these next few months to the herd immunity, right, that thing that we want, it definitely mutes the ability for more of those strains to show up and then start a whole new spike. Like, we don't want another spike, folks. That's what we want. We want to just kind of get to the finish line and then hopefully get to a place where we're living with this in a different way.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I think it's really helpful just to look at the global death tolls from pandemics. And if you look on the far left, like the 1918 flu, right, 50 million people died. The next highest was the HIV and AIDS, right, in the 1980s, 35 million. The third is today.
Right. And the HIV is more of an endemic. It's been going on. It didn't go away. That's just something that stuck around, which is, there we go.
Yeah, so that's the point that you want to make that a lot of people haven't thought about is you're not going to eradicate COVID-19. It's most likely going to be with us the rest of our lives. However, and that means it goes from a pandemic to an endemic. And all that means is that you can live with it, that it falls into the category of being as deadly as the flu itself. Yeah. So COVID isn't going to go away despite the vaccinations, Jay. The most likely outcome is that it turns into an endemic, just like the flu, right? So let's look at unemployment. So on that happy note, well, I mean, being able to live with something, the word live is really important.
Yeah, and not have to shelter in place. There will be some structural changes to the economy to accommodate it, but we can move to a very different place than we've been for the last 12 months.
Yeah, sure. And COVID was like a blunt hammer, right, on the economy. It showed up and bam, just like that, unemployment showed up. So we ended the year at 8.1% unemployment. And I just want to point out to you, and again, this is wonderful perspective. And Ruben, again, jump in anytime you want to say something, buddy. If you go all the way back to 1947 and just trace it, just look at the graph and tell us how many times you see something higher than 8%. Right. Which tells you you're in a tough spot.
Right.
The number that we would argue is 6%. Now that dotted line is 5%, and that's the historic average of unemployment. However, 6% is really the number, meaning that if you're below 6%, you're definitely moving in a good spot. You get above 6%, and immediately you're in a bad spot. Okay? And let's just keep that in mind. So this gives you a little more historical perspective. On the left, that's currently. And so we were at 3.5%. We were almost virtual 100% employment, right, Ruben?
Yeah, I mean, coming into this, we were about as low as we could probably go, and then we basically had to shut down, a huge chunk of the economy. The service industry still, we're going to see that in a second, like very high unemployment levels, but we've kind of moved our way back to where now we're close to basically where we were at the end of the last kind of big downturn we had, where, we had really persistent unemployment last time. It's a little bit slower this time. We may see some of that persistence too, because there's going to be a lot of friction in how the service industry starts to come back. We've seen
hang on
a lot of money flow into other stuff.
Yeah, hang on. Hold that thought. Let's dot the I on what you just said, though, which is why these two graphs are out here. So if we look at the one on the left, what Ruben's telling you is that, man, that hammer hit, we went to 14.7. By the way, that's catastrophic. Yeah. That's not just unemployment. That is catastrophic unemployment.
Since the Great Depression, it hasn't spiked that high, right, Ruben? I mean, you have to go back 100 years.
Yeah. Even in the Great Recession, it never got above 9.6, right?
We had some big jumps back in the Great Recession. I think it went a little bit higher than that, and it was also a little bit harder to track back then. But I mean, we had to basically tell people to go home. I mean, that's kind of the biggest thing is even during the Great Recession, you were able to you had the New Deal. People were able to put more people back to work over time, but we had to just tell people to go sit at home.
Yeah, well, that's a straight line up.
Yeah,
that's not a gradual. That's overnight, which is again unheard of. What Ruben said, though, and I think it's really important to repeat this, and that is notice where we are today and notice where we ended up in 2013 after the Great Recession.
It took 4 years to unwind it the last time.
Right, but we're back where we were in terms of that. But different. The unemployment back in 13 was spread out probably more evenly across industries. When you look at where we are today, that's not true.
No.
If we look at this graph, which I love this graph, and thank you, Ruben, and your team for doing this. This is so instructive. So this is unemployment and income by sector. So on the far left, let's look at that. The blue line is what that sector earns weekly. And then the yellow was unemployment in August 2020. And the purple is unemployment basically now.
Right.
So if we go across this, your eye immediately jumps. Let's go to the far right. And what you notice is the worst unemployment is on the far right, the people that make the least amount of money. Mm-hmm. And the most employed is on the far left, the people that make the most amount of money. So the people that earn the most amount of money are literally back to almost full employment at 3.4% in the financial sector. Mm-hmm. If we go to the far...
If you look at it, Gary, actually solely by income, we have some other stats that we pulled. It's like in the top quartile of earners right now, they're actually up 3% in employment. Like their employment's better than it was at the beginning. If you look at the bottom quartile, there's still 21% unemployment in that quartile. So this speaks to it by sector, but if you look at it as a whole, you can really start to see the division in unemployment by income that you were just kind of pointing out.
Yeah, so the biggest hit, of course, is leisure and hospitality. And sitting at almost around 16% right now, that's devastating, right? The restaurant industry is probably the hardest hit, right? So they literally have, they got as high as 22% unemployment. 16%.
Yeah, I mean, the Restaurant Association, I think, is saying that something like 17% of restaurants permanently closed last year.
Yeah.
It's a lot of small businesses.
And of those, what's interesting is 16% were 16 years or more in business. So these were not brand new businesses that are going out.
Right.
So that's leisure and hospitality. The next biggest one is construction, which jumped up. Now that's commercial construction.
Right.
So commercial construction is definitely taking a beating right now. The next highest is transportation and warehousing. So just think the airlines, think buses, think that industry. The third is retail trade, right? And you would expect that, right? The retail, particularly the bricks and mortar retail industry, is taking a beating. So what all this tells you is when they talk about a K-shaped economy, meaning that one group is experiencing growth and opportunity, and another group is experiencing loss. That's it. And this shows you exactly where that's coming from.
From an equity standpoint, this hits so many things, Gary, because the people on the left side of the graph, they owned houses, and so they got to see the crazy appreciation last year.
Yeah.
Their stock portfolios grew. So when you talk about the K-shape, I mean, it was two different experiences for groups of people depending on what they did in their income level. And the people on the right, they didn't get to participate in any of the positives of last year. They just got all of the negatives.
Yeah. So unemployment as a whole is now around that 6.7%. Mm-hmm. And remember, the number is 6.
Right.
So we're on the wrong side of 6 right now. Mm-hmm. And the challenge is how do you get that back? And that's a real challenge, because until you get to that herd vaccination number, that immunization number, it's going to be hard. right?
Part of that is reopening the economy, which is why there's so many people that are putting pressure on that part of it. But there's also parts of the economy that are going to have to be structurally rebuilt. Like we were talking about this, like when's the next time you want to be in a crowded concert?
Yeah.
Well, will people feel okay? I want to be there tomorrow. I know, but when will people feel comfortable doing some of those activities that we're used to doing?
I don't know.
Interesting pattern in that same line is that everyone's been, with the stimulus money we have gotten, right, the aid money, people have spent it, but you can't go spend that money at those struggling businesses, right? They're closed. So we're actually, to some extent, funding their competitors while they're out of the market with, more digital options, seeing all this money flow into them. So that's like another pattern that's been emerging.
One of our favorite,
raised a lot of questions for like how we deal with that.
One of our favorite theaters had to file for Chapter 11, right? Yep. And people were spending their money on digital subscriptions when they couldn't be putting their money into that physical experience. Exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, and funding the competition against those physically based businesses through no fault of their own, except they were just physically based, and a COVID hit.
Yep.
All right. So GDP took a massive hit in the first 2 quarters, and then rebounded, and I think we ended the year at 3.5% for the entire year. And again, we
contracted.
Yeah,
that was the largest contraction since basically we unwound from World War II, which, in historical context, we were at like 100% employment during that time, in the war effort. So like the whole economy had to be restructured after World War II. If you rule that out, you're going back to the Great Depression.
Yeah. So just a reminder, GDP is the code word is spending. So you have consumer spending, you have government spending, you have net exports,
and
you have investments. Yeah. And so GDP is a representation of how much money is being spent on goods and services. And a drop of 3.5% is pretty much unprecedented. Right.
Yeah. And a lot of that drop, Gary, happened in the service industry. Spending on goods actually went up last year, but if you look at services, like the vast majority of the fall in GDP can be directed directly at the fall in spending on services that was down, I think, something like over $500 billion last year.
Yeah, and and it's not hard to imagine, right? Because anything that required contact, right, from getting your nails done, by the way, or right, anything where you had to come in, getting your hair cut, right, anything like that. Working out in a gym next to someone else, right? Sitting in a theater, like you said. Any of those, right? Think about all of the men and women that are employed in those businesses as waiters, waitresses, bartenders, cleaning crews. All of that became unnecessary, right? Yeah. Well, we've gotten 5 rounds of federal legislative relief. Totaling $3.6 trillion. It's not enough, by the way. We're right now moving from the House to the Senate. You have another $1.9 trillion that they're trying to put in there. They will get something passed. I'm fairly certain of that. The challenge again is getting it to the right hands and making sure the right men and women get it. And that was always the debate and the discussion. Hopefully they got that right.
The words you use, relief, I mean, Ruben pointed this out to us. I wasn't completely thinking this way, but we didn't have an economic crisis. We had a health crisis that spilled over into the economy. And so before we even talk about stimulus packages, which a lot of people these are actually relief packages.
That's right.
Because of the extraordinary nature of what happened to our economy, first people need relief, and then we want to stimulate the economy to move in the right direction.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, we basically have the economy on life support right now, right? Like we can't direct that money at re-employing those people. We can't direct that money into the businesses that are struggling. So we basically just have to keep everyone as whole as possible and hope that when things goes back to normal, more of that money starts to recirculate into those spaces. So I really do think of it as like the economy sort of sectors of the economy are on life support so that when things get better, we can wake it back up and then start that stimulus process.
That's right.
I want to hit one thing because a lot of people, they see that the trillions of dollars and they worry about inflation. Ruben, you kind of helped us, like you looked at this really hard. Does the amount of money that the government is borrowing to do this, does that worrisome to you?
Not right now. I mean, number one, we'll talk about interest rates later, and that applies to the government too. The rates they're borrowing money at and their long-term borrowing right now are so low that with inflation, they're almost a negative interest rate basically.
Yeah,
that's a big part of it. And then we borrow our money in our own money, which I don't want to get into the dynamics of that, but it basically rules out the kind of hyperinflation you hear hyperbolized a lot in the media a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Hey, I think it's there's a lot of good evidence that the putting of this money into the economy is not going to have an inflationary impact at this point.
It's also worth pointing out right now the Federal Reserve actually has an immense amount of tools to deal with inflation, whereas for the opposite, they almost out of tools to deal with, which would be deflation. So if we do start to see, and the Fed's actually waiting to see inflation pick up above 2% before they act, which has been a recurring theme in the news lately. They have a lot of things they can do right now in order to pull inflation back if they have to, versus trying to stimulate the economy anymore right now.
Yeah, that's exactly right. They are much more concerned, we all are, with deflation, the prices of things dropping versus prices going up, because you can deal with that. You have a lot more tools to deal with that. All right, well, let's switch gears then. So that's kind of the economy, right? And the way I think about it again is from employment, you're always looking for the what's around 6. If it's below 6, you're in a good spot, right? 5 is better, 4 is better, 3.5 is amazing, but anything below 6, you're not in a crisis mode. Okay, when you think of GDP, 2 is a good number. 3, anything above 2, 2.2, 2.5, 3, these are great numbers. Get to 4, wow, 4% growth in spending in a year doesn't happen a whole lot, right? No. You start dropping though below 2, you get to 1.5% growth, and the economy starts to feel sluggish and anemic. You drop below 0, and right, so you can be your own economist. The things you're looking for is, 1, what's the employment rate? Is it 6 high or above 6 or below 6? GDP, is it at 2 or above or 2 or below, right? And then you look at interest rates. And when you look at those, just those 3, right? And the fourth, if you're going to, would be inflation itself. And that number again is around 2%. Is around 2%. That's right. So if you look at those 4 things and you understand that, right, GDP, the number is 2, right? Inflation, the number is 2. You look at employment, the number is 6 or less. You look at that, then just look at interest rates to see what's the cost of money. Does it encourage spending or discourage spending? And then that's it. And now you have a sense of how the economy's going, right? All right, let's jump into home sales. Well, I think everyone knows the answer to this. It was a record-breaking year. It started out well. Yellow is 2019, purple is 2020. And you can see in the U.S. that in April and May, man, it just derailed completely. But by the time we got to August, we were in new territory, and it just took off and stayed that way. And January's no different.
Yeah. In some states in those April and May, remember, they weren't considered essential. Like, it dropped to 0 in some places effectively. So, I mean, that on average getting there, we all remember how scary that was before it rebounded and went the other way.
Yeah, we'll talk a little more about the effects of all of that. The next slide I think is really interesting. And this shows you again, the purple line is 2020 sales, right? That's the average. And right, we ended the year at 5.6 million. So if you look across there, you get a sense of how good a year that was. Now, we've had better years. So we went back and we just kind of marked in blue. We took the 5 best years of the recovery of the Great Recession, and we took the last 5. And I want you to notice that you're only 0.9 off.
Right. I mean, the 5 years before the Great Recession and the last 5 years are 2 of the most prosperous periods in our industry, period.
In the history of the real estate, they are the 2 most prosperous time periods.
Yeah, we've had, 3 years that were better than last year in the history of NAR's data?
Yep.
Only 3 years. Now, again, it's not to say that we're not all geniuses and we're brilliant at being realtors, but I just want to point out, if you had a tough year, you need to really re-examine your lead gen and customer service techniques. You really do. I don't mean that facetiously, and I don't mean it cruelly. I'm just saying you need to really look in the mirror because there were more transactions going on than almost at any other time in history.
We saw it with Bold last year when we launched the first Bold pivot. Like, there were a lot of people that when this all happened, they didn't know what to do. But the people who leaned into it, started making their care calls, we started to see them shoot up.
Well, the trick here is, Jay, thank you for saying that. The trick is that you always lead gen. You're always either looking for new leads that people you haven't met, or you're looking for referrals and repeat business from people that you, of course, have met. And you never stop, which means timing finds you. You cannot time the market. But if you're always in it, timing will regularly find you, and it will reward you more than other people.
That's right.
So consistency across the years is actually what helps you build an amazing career. It really does. So this is, to me, this is the slide. This is the money slide because it tells everything. And it's unemployment and housing by age. And on the far left is 24 years or younger. And they were at 9.7% unemployment last year, but they only make up 3% of the people that buy houses. And then you have the 25 to 34 age group. They were at 6.8. That's not a good number. It's above 6, right? They make up 23%. Then you get to the 35 plus, that makes up 74% of all home purchases. They're at 5.3, which means they're employed.
That's how we knew, like when the housing industry took off, like how is this happening with 20 million people unemployed?
Yeah.
The people who buy houses weren't in that group.
That's right. That's exactly right.
We've hit this from basically 3 different angles now, right? We looked at it by unemployment by sector. We looked at it by unemployment or by income and unemployment by age or by income. And now we're looking at by age. And like, they basically all just point to the fact that like the people who got hurt this year we're not the people who are buying houses right now. The question is 5 years from now, how many of those people would have been buying houses that won't? So we may have a longer term thing we're going to have to keep an eye on. But basically the reason our industry was able to do so well was basically the fact that most of our clients were not the people who were hurt the most by this.
Well, and where you would see that show up, and thank you for that comment, is in the below age 34. It meaning that they lost jobs. They probably spent their savings. And now what Ruben is saying is that it's just going to take longer for those individuals to get employed and then to build back up the cash necessary to become a purchaser again.
And that 25 to 34, that's most likely your first-time home buyers.
It is.
Who are in the most competitive segment of the market. They're having the hardest time buying, period, too. If they had the job, they were struggling as well.
Well, it's not an insignificant, 23 is not an insignificant percentage. It's just not the dominant one.
Right.
And again, 6.8% is not 10% or 14%, meaning there are plenty of individuals that, right, I mean, there's 73.2% of them are employed.
Right.
To put that in a different way.
The Central Finance Bureau actually put out a report yesterday, and one of the things they pointed out is actually of the groups that are behind on rent, single-family renters are the highest if you exclude manufactured housing. So single-family 2 to 4 units. So it's another thing in our industry that, like, over the next year, we're going to have to keep an eye on, especially in that investor segment of the market, of how that's going to play out, because there's no equivalent of forbearance for a renter, right? So they're just accumulating back rent right now. So when those eviction moratoriums roll over, there's going to be an issue that needs to be resolved there. And how that's going to play out and how that's going to affect home sales is something we need to keep an eye on. It's a question of how many people are there available to just cycle back into those houses as they become vacant.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is that there is a day of reckoning coming. We don't know what it looks like, but you can see the clouds forming, particularly around renters that are not paying their rent and mortgages that are not being paid. And we don't know how that turns out. Could turn out really good. One thing that everyone has going for them is that home prices have gone up, not down. So there's equity.
They're most likely going to be an equity seller.
Yeah, we can talk about it in a second. So if we look at inventory, this tells the story. 1.9 months of inventory in the United States is absurd, right? And everyone watching knows this already. You experience this, right? It's tough to be a buyer right now because there just isn't enough inventory. We talked about this over and over again for the last 10 years. We've talked about the lost new homes that weren't being built.
Yeah, over 5 million homes after the Great Recession because the home building industries were hit so hard. That inventory just never showed up.
Yeah, and you and I, we talked about this every year, and we've just said there's a day of reckoning. We're not bringing on enough inventory to keep prices in check. And here you are. I mean, by our calculation, there could be anywhere from 5.5, 6 million homes that were not built in America that would normally, on average, would have been built, and they would have been, for the vast majority of those, would have been in the lower price range.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we read an article that I think yesterday with Carl, we were sharing it. When you have a new build home, those homes that weren't built, nobody has to go find a home to sell their home.
Yeah.
So there's no musical chairs that we're seeing so hard. Like people might sell, but when it gets this bad, it's a vicious cycle. People are like, well, I'd sell my house if I thought I could go buy a house.
You're in uncharted territory.
Yeah.
You just came off one of the top years in the history of sales, and you're now sitting on the lowest level of inventory ever recorded. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, here you go, right? The balance is 6 months, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to look at the chart and realize that the annual month supply of inventory for the entire year last year was half of that, was around 3.1. Yeah, so it's just tough. Part of that story is interest rates that, right? They took their jump in 18, and then they started, and people, again, they forget that in 18 we got as high as 4.4%. People forget that, and then it just made a steady climb all the way to where it is. Now it's upticked a little bit.
Yeah, it's turning a little bit this year.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So there you go. And you want to talk about a party pooper? Go to 4% or 5% interest rates on top of the prices that you're currently paying. And you could see all of a sudden the musical chairs stop, the buyers don't exist, and everyone is holding these pieces of real estate, and now they have to wait for the next cycle,
right,
in order to sell them, because prices will start dropping because there's just not demand.
What we always point out is on a 30-year mortgage, if your interest rates go up by 1%, from 3% to 4%, it's like a 10% increase in the monthly cost of the home.
Yeah.
So it has a meaningful impact on affordability for people.
And so this is just a historical perspective on mortgage rates. And this is a great graphic to show your buyers, right? Mm-hmm. They know it intuitively, but to show them this and say, look, you're in uncharted territory, right? The historical average from 90, which is 30 years, to 2020 is around 6%. Mm-hmm. The historical average from 72, right, was almost 8%, right?
I bought my first home around 2003, right when they started dipping below 6%, and people were like, wow, rates are so low now.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone was refinancing. It was like a big deal.
Sure.
And in retrospect, it was like, if you still have a mortgage at 6%, what are you doing?
Yeah, anybody who's been in the industry for 20 years, mm-hmm. has a memory on what it's like to help people buy and sell real estate at interest rates that hover in the 8%, 9%.
You started at the peak. You started your real estate career when in Texas, it was like they were above 20% in Texas.
Yeah, it was like 18. Well, interest rates got to as high as 18% for a period, right?
Right. This is the annual average, not what it spiked to.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you had usury in Texas, so you couldn't pay 18%. So it was illegal to charge over 10. So we had sellers paying 14 discount points, things like that. It was crazy, right?
Yeah.
And by the way, the industry took a hit, and then it turned around. It figured out how to transact in that environment, and we were off and running.
Yeah. People still sold their homes.
Yes, people bought and sold real estate. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. So this simply points out to you that if you want to follow the Treasury notes, it's not totally tracking right now exactly, but Treasury notes tend to be the more stable.
The 10 years in particular.
Yeah, the 10-year Treasury note tends to be a stable rate. And so they look at that, and then the people that are pricing mortgages say, okay, for the additional risk and uncertainty that we're going to get on a mortgage, what would we price that at? So they tend to the Treasury notes and where they're going tend to end up setting.
And what's it doing there at the end? This year, you've seen this year, you pointed this out to us, Ruben. You're like, it's, the 10-year notes are going up because they couldn't go any lower.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you've been following, the Wall Street Journal and the stock market, you've probably heard a lot about Treasury rates lately because they've been trending up. Fed came out and made some statements. They've kind of flattened back out. But I mean, in our industry, you should really expect the mortgage rates to start moving back into lockstep with Treasuries pretty soon. We saw that risk premium you were talking about, Gary, shrink a little bit during this last thing because at first it popped. People were uncertain about the real estate market. Then we became sort of the golden boy of the industry, right? Like we were the part of the economy that was still like red hot while everything else was kind of struggling. So that risk premium actually shrank some. We saw those refis as mortgage rates got crazy low. But now things are starting to move back into lockstep and that thing's starting to kind of level out. And we see Treasury rates trending up. They're just, and you can see historically they're at all-time lows. So we can expect those over time as the economy improves to slowly move upwards, and mortgage rates should slowly move upwards with them. But it's going to take a little while.
It is. Any predictions for interest rates this year?
I mean, I think we're probably going to get above 3% again, but I don't think we'll see 4. That's sort of it's hard to pull a crystal ball on these guys right now. But with the economy improving, we should see them trend up slowly.
You should.
Yeah.
You should. So just be aware of that. You should see that happen. Though this kind of tells the tale, though. So this chart, the 3.6 was we started the year at that as the interest rate, and then you see where we ended, right? And that literally fueled the run-up in prices, right? So the median home price at the end of the year was 304. Where we ended up, the actual price, the median home price that we ended up with was 297.
The average for the whole year.
Yeah, the average for the whole year.
We've been tracking that trend line since the Great Recession when that kind of bite in home equity got yanked out. And we're within a couple of years right now of getting right back on that trend line, right, Ruben?
Yeah, I mean, if we have 2 years of 7%, we'd be right back on that line, basically.
That's crazy. Yeah, that line's there for a reason. And that prices are going to, what history says is that prices are going to move and naturally be pushed towards that 4%. When it goes below, it may take 10 years, but it's going to start correcting itself back to that number, right? Yeah, this is just interesting, and it shows you the incredible period of time that we've been in. It's not the highest, however, right? The highest would have been the run up to the Great Recession, right?
Which was a bubble. We now, in retrospect, we found out, right? It was too hot.
Yeah, but yeah, that's exactly right. If you notice what happened after that, right, you can see in where it says the 4.1% negative, you can see what happened to houses during those years. They were not appreciating at all. They were going backwards, which of course then set up for the longest recorded recovery.
Right.
Right. And 9% is a big number this year. I mean, that's enough to start raising eyebrows.
Yes, it is.
For sure. But we had a unique situation. So how that unwinds is going to kind of dictate
this year will tell
the future.
Yeah, this year will tell the tale on that. It'll tell the tale. If you see anything close to that again, then hang on.
Right.
That would be extremely significant in terms of what you could expect after that.
Yeah, and inventory is going to drive that story.
Right.
Yeah, no question about that. So affordability, again, when I got in real estate, people had to spend 36%, literally 35% of their income on a home purchase. And today it stands at 16%, which is what we love. When we give you perspective, we want you to notice that the lowest was at 13, right? And that's, again, coincides with those prices just
2012, and they also had low interest rates for that moment in time. It was
Yeah.
low for then.
Yeah,
so
that's
we had both of those together.
Yeah. And then we get to the whole issue of distressed sales. And right now, if you look at this, foreclosures is the yellow, short sales are the purple. And if you go back to the Great Recession, you literally see that 40% of all home sales were distressed sales in 2008.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it was absolutely crazy. But notice that kind of stayed high all the way through 2012. And then you saw a real steady decline. Where we are today is remarkable, less than 1%.
The negative appreciation, Gary. All those homes were underwater. Like, one of the things that fixes that is homes appreciating.
That's right.
So that it flips the equation and they can have a better likelihood of becoming an equity
And they
seller.
weren't appreciating during that period.
Right.
Yeah. So again, the price of homes will have a definitely different outcome, which, again, you don't want anyone to lose their home. You just don't want that to happen.
Right.
So, but it'll bring inventory to the market, and then it'll bring inventory, either because
the thing we're watching here, Gary, like we mentioned before, is a forbearance. We've got, something like 5 million plus homes in forbearance right now. It's about, I think, 5 months of inventory if you were all to come on the market at one time. Another interesting stat that just came out yesterday was that of the homes right now coming out of forbearance, about 10% of them are from home sales. So basically people selling and getting out with positive equity. And that number has been trending up as we've gotten nearer and nearer to kind of the back end of these forbearance time periods. So it's definitely a trend that I think we should be paying attention to. There's going to be a lot of people that are in situations where they need to take that option.
No, that's right. You can expect new home sales and forbearance sales could absolutely increase the inventory here in the next 12 months without a shadow of a doubt. Right? Yep. And if you look at Canada, same thing. 551. Wow. Right? They hit a new high.
The best by quite a bit, too.
Yeah, the Canadian government spent a couple of years trying to really slow things down, and they were fairly effective at that. And then here we go.
And Ruben, I think you shared with us. Go ahead.
Oh, in January, they saw a 46% jump in home sales this last month. It was like a record pace for them.
Yeah, it's crazy. Absolutely crazy. Yep. And same with Canadian home prices. I mean, they were on the 4% and they were way beyond it. And we don't even know if they'll ever. There's no rhyme or reason now to right. There's no economic understanding around where prices land in Canada.
People have been talking about Canada as a potential for a housing bubble since I started at KW 8 years ago. And as of yet, it's still chugging along. So it's.
Hey, Canada's an awesome place to live.
Yep.
It's just the way it is. And inventory, right? That is, they're way up
so
there.
Happy about Mia.
Second best seller market that they've seen in recorded history, right? And that just means that 70% of the new inventory would sell.
I think, like you said, that when they translated this, it's like they're right at 1.9 months inventory too.
Yeah,
so they're at a very similar space.
Yeah, January was 1.9 months, and it was 90% sales to new listings in Canada. So, like, if you translate that back to us, we're probably also somewhere close to 90% of listings coming off the market in the first month.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think everyone joining us today is personally.
They're feeling that.
Yeah, that's no new. That's not new news.
Yeah.
Yeah. So interesting. So we did a survey and just asked some questions, and just documenting this, that demand for home offices, larger backyards, high-speed internet, things like that have really increased significantly as people have had to really spend more time in their home and in their yard than they ever did before, right? The importance of proximity to work and the amenities has actually decreased because people aren't going to work.
I mean, who thought that they would ever need 2 home offices? I mean, that's such a rare thing, right?
Yeah.
I don't know that it persists, but like last year, that became something with kids working from home and parents working from home. Having those extra bedrooms really matter to a lot of people.
Yeah, the biggest challenge that you have as an employer And this is not my opinion. This is the stated public opinion by employers, and that is they really don't know if people are working or not. I mean, they have no idea if they're working for 8 hours or 6 hours or 10 hours a day. All they have is the result of the work. They have no sense of the time or what time of day. They just don't know, and that creates inefficiencies. Mm-hmm. And if inefficiencies show up in any way, then all of a sudden you could see, corporations flip and go, "You're coming back,
right?
You're coming in." And I don't know that will happen. I'm just saying that the other side of this, and you hear this a lot from employers, and that is the challenge for employees is when you take them out of the workplace and you simply send them work and they do it. It's hard to get promoted. It's hard to get raises. You just don't know the people well enough. You're not connected to them to be able to make those decisions that way. And those individuals that want to earn more or rise up in an organization mm-hmm. will volunteer to come back because they'll see that as an advantage over the others. And when they start doing that, others will see it. And the next thing you know, there is a great potential that people show back up for work.
I think some of the components of the industry, like we saw it, like even in the tech components of our own workers, there's some industries that have had a lot more remote work for a long time, and they've gotten pretty good at measuring productivity. But we haven't done that with a whole lot of jobs, and that's where that gap is. Like, I don't know how to say if you're being productive or not because we don't have a way to measure your work.
Yeah. We, there's a lot more interest in suburban and rural, right?
I just tell people follow up. I mean, I've already started reading articles where people made a snap decision, last year, and while it normally would take them 10 years to move again, they may rethink that decision in the next couple of years.
Yeah. So new home starts. So this is what we've been talking about, and that is the number that you're looking for is 1 million starts a year. Mm-hmm. Go back and look at the run-up to the Great Recession. And, man, they look at those numbers.
Right.
Man, that was a lot of new home construction, which flooded the market.
We were cranking out some houses.
Yeah. And then look what happened. The reverse. All of a sudden, can you imagine going from a high of around 1.5 million starts to a low of 442,000?
Yeah.
I mean, so we have this lost decade. You can see that each year it started climbing after 2011, but we're just now back to that number. So we could see, I believe, in the next 2 years that we're going to see an explosion of new home construction. Mm-hmm. We're out right now, developers and cities are looking for land that homes can be built on, condos, townhomes. And they're going to release all of that, and yep. you're going to see if you're smart as a real estate agent, you would be out knocking on doors and sniffing around land to try to help the builder, right, developer get that, and you've just got your listings for the next year, next 2 years, next mm-hmm. 3 years. Yeah. So if we look at commercial real quick, you'll see that retail and office, they're the ones that have really gotten hit the most. Right, they're the vacancy rates for retail, and then the vacancy rate for office. These are tough numbers. They're going up.
I don't think the first shoe has even dropped on some of these. I think some people have been getting by, and the vacancy probably will trend up over the next 12 months as people have to make decisions.
Yeah, multifamily, fine, industrial is of course the shining star in all this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, industrial is kind of interesting because it did trend up slightly, but a lot of that was actually due to the fact that absorption just lacked a little bit behind all the new inventory that was coming onto the market in industrial. Like with Amazon blowing up and all those businesses, there's a lot of warehousing being built right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I own industrial, I own office, I own multifamily, I own retail. I can tell you right now, industrial is the shining star in anybody's investment portfolio right now. By a long shot. The world's wealthy are getting wealthier. I mean, if you look at 2006 and just track it to 2019, there are a lot more people. And this is a net worth of $1 million excluding your home. So, same in Canada, it's just the wealthier getting wealthier. So if you think about luxury real estate, there's a lot more people that can buy and sell luxury real estate than there was just 10 years ago.
And second homes,
Well, no question about that. Yeah. In terms of how real estate is treated as an investment class, it's kind of settled into this 15%. If you go to the top at around '06 and you look at 24% in real estate and 14% in cash, and you go to the bottom and you see it flipped.
Right.
So all you have really going on is people after the Great Recession, it changed their psyche. This is just my opinion, but it changed their psyche, and they just got it parked. It's just parked. They like to look at it. They like to see it and know that it's there. Everything else is, and the only other thing is you're seeing is the stock market has stayed fairly steady. Fixed incomes have gone down, and alternative investments have gone up over the last decade, right? Which would be private equity, that sort of thing. Yeah, so here's what we know, right? In a survey, 40% of agents report increased interest from clients in second and vacation homes. No question about that. And if you go all the way, again, the wealthy are wealthier, and the wealthy are the least unemployed.
Right.
There you go. And that's all you need to know in terms of what the demand is for.
And with mortgage rates, a second home is about as affordable as it's ever going to get.
Yeah. So if we ask the question, where are we going? This is not complicated. I mean, relief is the big issue. And number two is any sort of tax break around first-time home buyers. And this is not uncommon. If you're new to the industry, this is not uncommon at all. Back in 1979, when I got in real estate, this was a big problem, right, for first-time home buyers. And the city actually issued bonds at low interest rates, and which opened back up the first-time home buyer market, which opened back up the move-up market.
Right. It's the first step on the property ladder. It can unlock the whole market.
Yeah, and the government has, like Ruben referred to earlier, the government has tools that it can do. And giving first-time buyers tax credits is an absolute wonderful way to stimulate someone going out and going, whoa, I just got my down payment.
Right.
Right, which is how they make up for the lack of savings.
Yep.
And in terms of vaccines, we already talked about this, and that is there's a good chance that by the end of May there will be enough vaccines out there in the marketplace that if people get them, then you could see the economy truly start to open up by the end of summer. You can really see that actually happening.
Gives me chills to think about.
Yeah, that's right. Right. Now, in terms of we're getting back to normal, the 70 to 75% need to be vaccinated. And number two, and this is the bigger question, is will consumers actually come back? Can I just speak as a 63-year-old, fixed to be 64? I'm not sure, right, when I go back. I've got both vaccines, and so I'm supposed to be in that spot where I'm supposed to feel comfortable. I don't feel comfortable at all, right? And mainly it has to do with the idea of getting it and becoming a long hauler where you've got side effects that may affect you the rest of your life.
Right. Those percentage cases that have the lingering that they still don't completely understand.
Yeah, it could be as many as 30% of those that get it and survive it have long haul repercussions from getting it. Right, the lack of taste, the lack of smell, all kind of things. Right. So anyway.
Well, so some of the habits that you formed during the pandemic of having things delivered and stuff, it's not like you're not going to participate in the economy. You're just going to participate in a new way.
In a different way. That's exactly right. Yep. So this kind of gives you just a quick forecast on where we think things could go, right? Therefore, home sales in the U.S. are forecasted at 5.9, which would be really good growth, by the way, and would be an amazing year. Amazing, right? Again, one of the top three ever experienced. Median price, that 7% that Ruben talked about, could be a real thing. Again, lack of inventory. However, that could set you up for later in the year or next year to look completely different than this. It could, right? And then months of supply.
It's still really low supply.
Oh, yeah. That's exactly right. Yeah. So the only thing we're pointing out here real quick is seasonality, and that is, if you look at on the left, what you'll notice is that this is what the average is, the 5-year average by quarter. And if you look over and just compare the second quarters to purple, right? So normally the average would have been 29% of the year's sales occurred in the second quarter, and only 22 did. And they turned around and made it up in the third and fourth quarters. And you already know all of that, right?
What'll mess people up is when you start seeing headlines that say that sales are up X% year over year in the second quarter, and what they're not maybe saying is how low they were artificially low they were, and they're back to normal.
Yeah, it just meant that COVID messed with the predictable seasonality of when sales occurred. And we'll see this year. We don't know the answer. We have no way of predicting what will this fall now back in a line again as the market settled down. And there's a great argument that it has. So I would say we're more likely to see more of the common seasonality.
Right.
Yeah. All right, let's jump to this, the National Association of Realtors. Let's go through this profile. And this is one of the great services that NAR does for us, and we want to always thank them for this because it gives you great insight and understanding. You have your own experience, and then this helps you validate probably what you're already experiencing and dot that I for you, right? So the first one is around first-time home buyers, and I just want you to notice that the historic average was 40% of all sales were first-time home buyers. Well, we haven't seen that in a long time. They kind of fled the market in 2012, and they haven't come back, and it's just getting lower, right, at 31% last year, and that's tough, right?
People are waiting longer, like 7 to 10 years longer to buy their first home. And we know that some of the things that are impacted in this, we know that these people right now are disproportionately unemployed. Yeah. And they have a lot of college debt that they didn't have back in 01 and 99.
Yeah, it was it was 29 years of age, and now it's 33 years of age.
I think that's right. Do you have that number handy? Yes. In the 81, the first time average median age for first-time home buyers was 29, and 36 for repeat, and it's increased by 7 years today.
Yeah, so people are waiting longer, and we understand that debt and job loss in that age group counts for that, right? Yeah. So the primary reason for purchasing a home, right? Well, duh. Number one is they want to own a house. Number two is they want a larger house, right? Job-related, relocation, change in family situation, right? Had a child graduated, that sort of thing, right? And the desire to be closer to family and friends. These are really the big reasons. And what's important is this also tells you where you find people, right? I used to call newlywed couples out of the newspaper. Why? Because a change in family situation leads, right, is 8% of all home sales are due to that.
Right. You have a baby, you need more space. Those are things that happen.
Yep,
you change jobs, that's why relo. And I think, Ruben, you pointed out on all these NAR slides, they were from July of 2019 to July of 2020, so it didn't get the second half of the year where we might have expected some different answers. Is that right?
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay.
So if you look at tenure in previous home, all you have to do is just go to the bottom.
Yeah.
And what you notice is it's been very consistent for the last 5 years of around 10 years. People are staying. They predict they're going to stay longer, but they don't. And the median is 5 years that they stay in the house. So buyer's expectation is 15. That hasn't changed either, but that's not true. They move. We're moving right now. Every
People
10
always
years.
think they're going to stay longer than they do, and I think it's because of unexpected life changes. They get divorced, they get married, they have a baby, they change jobs. Those are things they didn't plan on or didn't anticipate, and it changes their circumstances.
Yeah, the 10 year. The only thing that's important for you to know is if 10 years is the median, then if you're talking to 10 people, one of them on average is moving this year. And that tells you how many people, that informs you how many people you have to have in your database that you're touching in order to hit the financial goals that you've established for your business. That's why it matters, right? So weeks in home search, it dropped to 8. We don't know the answers to we don't know the reasons why these answers are there. I would have thought it would have been a lot higher because of the lack of inventory.
I'd love to see that graphed by week. And in December, like how long were they having to look because they had to make so many offers to actually get a home? I don't know.
Yeah, I suspect we're going to see it. It's going to creep back up. It just, the lack of inventory is causing that, right? Yeah. So first step in the home buying process. So again, this is really interesting, right? So it's settled in around 43% looked online. Now, does that mean they went to Zillow or did they go to your site? Where did they go? Nobody knows, right? My belief is they're on multiple sites. They're just window shopping, and that we all are, right? And we just click through, just in the belief that maybe we want to check and see if there's something on one that isn't on another.
And it feels like, you notice this, it feels like it should be a lot higher than 43%. So many things we do now, you just get out your phone and you start the process.
Well, I think it's 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, I believe that, and I said this the last couple of years, I think that's the way they ask the question that gives you this answer. But I believe that 100% of all buyers are online at some point. And whether the agent directs them there, whether they go there themselves, they're just going there, right? But it's also important to notice that there are still other methods. In other words, they're talking to a mortgage lender, right, or the bank. By the way, they're talking to friends and family. They drive neighborhoods. They visit open houses. Okay, that's where they are. So all those methodologies actually play into where you should be at some point, right, to find them. Information sources they use, it says not applicable, but the answer is going to be 93 to 95% they get their information online. By the way, 87% they get it from Realtors.
Yeah.
So they're getting it from both, by the way. Where they found the home they purchased, half of them say we found it on the internet. What it doesn't say is, did the agent send you there? Because again, I would bet the way they asked that question.
Right.
Because again, I would have said, yeah, 50% feels about right. The problem is it's very hard to buy a home without seeing it. Yeah. And when you see it, it always looks slightly different than the way the pictures, right? Yeah, that's right. But the next one, it says real estate agent. And I think it has, again, it has to do with the way the questions are asked, right? Yard signs, open house signs, 7%, friend, relative, neighbor, 6%. Yeah. So,
I mean, this also, I mean, it's weird in this kind of hot market, marketing a home is not nearly as challenging, right? Because they're selling so fast. But traditionally, we would say this is kind of your blueprint for marketing a listing. This is where people are finding them, and are you marketing the home in this manner as well?
Yeah, one of the things this points out again is the opportunity of the realtor. And that is, for the people you do business with, it should be 100% of, I'm kidding, of course, at 100%, but 100% of them, the agent found the home for them, either directly or indirectly.
Right.
That's what you want. Meaning that when asked, the person said, oh yeah, I worked with Jay and Wendy, and yeah, they gave me a couple of websites. I went and looked, and they sent properties to me, and we communicated constantly, and we found our home.
Right.
And that would be the normal process, right, for any individual who's staying in contact with their database and working with them on that basis, right? The value of a website features, again, this hasn't changed, right? No. They want detailed property info, they want property photos, they want floor plans, right? They want virtual tour, they want video. This is what they want. They want details or data around something that's sold, right? This is what they want. I thought it was interesting, though, that 83% said it was very useful or somewhat useful to have real estate agent contact info.
Yeah.
Which means they're looking for an agent.
Yeah. They want to get in. They want to know more about it.
Yeah, again, I'm going to make this statement, and I say it every year, and that is we have way too many orphaned clients. We have way too many people that are loose and running around. That shouldn't be that way. They should already be connected to a realtor because you're doing your lead generation, and then you're putting people in a database, and you're meaningfully touching that database on a regular basis to build the relationships so that you are their source of truth. And people would prefer that, to be honest with you.
We'll hit the stats. I mean, the people who would use that same agent again and do is reflective in how well we're staying in touch.
Yeah, so a method of home purchase.
Agents.
Yeah, 88% in 2020 used an agent. And that, if you look across the bottom there, you'll notice that around 2011, all of a sudden we crossed the line to 89%, and it's been in that range ever since. Mm-hmm. People are using realtors more than they were using them in the past, by the way. And I think that has to do with there's so much information.
They need someone to guide them through it.
They need someone to guide them through it. There's just too much. And yes, you need a realtor. This, again, is my pet peeve professionally, and that is this should just say, 90%, 80% that they have a written agreement with their buyers. And I don't understand it. A buyer representation agreement is no different than you getting a listing agreement signed. It's the same concept, and it protects you in the moment. Just like you tell a seller, look, I'll tear the listing up if you want to get out of it, right? You don't hold people against their will.
Right.
The purpose of a listing agreement is no different than the purpose of a buyer rep agreement, Jay, and that is the work that you've done up to that moment is protected. Mm-hmm. The next day, it's not meant to trap people and get paid for work you didn't do. So that's all it is. And the fact that, again, it hovers around this 40% number is an atrocity.
I think people need to get better at their scripts and dialogues. They need to be comfortable talking about their value proposition. Well, here's what I'm going to do for you. That's when you ask someone to sign an agreement, you have to offer something.
Yeah, that's right.
And I suspect that's a part of the fear of doing this, is that they're afraid that they won't portray their value high enough for someone. So someone might say no.
Yeah, that's right. Well, again, you should present a buyer representative agreement to every buyer you work with. And if they say no, they say no. Right. But you should explain how you get paid. You should explain all that to them, mm-hmm. and then you should ask them to sign an agreement. Right. And if they say no, they say no, Jay. But
the only times I ever hear that is like a hardcore investor. I mean, I just don't even hear of that happening.
Yeah. So then I think we have about 5 minutes left.
Yeah.
So what buyers want from their agents, the number one thing they want is find me the house, help me negotiate it, right? Help me with the pricing, help me with the paperwork. This is essentially what they want you to do.
And this last year, you really helped a lot of people negotiate. That's been the hard work for our buyers agents, championing their clients to get the home.
Yeah, I definitely would have said finding the right house and negotiating would have been like 100%. Everything else is everything else, particularly in this market. But we understand that that's our value. How they found them, 40% were referred and 13% used them previously. So 53% either were referred or they'd used them before.
They're in your database.
But the crazy thing is 88% said they would. Mm-hmm. Okay, so there's the disconnect of the industry. There's the disconnect. 88% said they would do it, and yet only 53%.
Yeah, there's the gap. And that's our opportunity to work our database to close that gap.
That's it. That's exactly right. Interviews, this hasn't changed, right? It's very steady, and that is be first. 73% of the time they hire the first agent. Doesn't mean it was the best agent. It was just the agent got there first, right? 16%. So literally, what is that? 89% is either number one or two. So if you're not number one or two, you're not getting it.
The competition isn't with having a better value proposition than your other agents. It's getting to the client first.
That's right.
That's it.
Yeah, that's right. Most important factors that buyers care about, well, the first one is honest and trustworthy. And number two is experience. Number three, reputation. But the way I think about that, always honest and trustworthy. Right. Always tell me the truth, right? I always say, tell them what you know, and if you don't know, go find out. Don't fake it.
Right.
And because people need to trust that they're getting the truth from you, either directly or indirectly through your sources. But number two, experience, reputation, that's all about knowledge.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's how it shows up.
Well, that's right.
Is you know the answer or know how to get it.
Well, if you ask someone, why does experience matter or why does reputation matter, they would say they're knowledgeable. They're knowledgeable about the market. They're knowledgeable about transactions. It's just knowledge. So if you're new to the business, you can still have the knowledge. You can have it. Having been new to the industry, you can have it, and people will trust you, even if you're new to the business, right? A lot of people say, well, I've been in it 10 years and look at all I've sold, thus I'm better than you. It doesn't really work like that, to be honest with you. It doesn't. Those are great brag rights. Got them, say them. But if you don't have them, don't be intimidated by them, right? Yeah. Do people still think real estate's a good investment? 83% say yeah, absolutely. Is real estate a better investment than stocks? 50%. Perfect. Yeah. That matches up really well with where people place their money between cash and stocks and alternatives and alternative investments. Yep. So, yeah, look at this. So 91% said they would definitely, I said 88, 91% say they would definitely or probably use you again.
And 53% do. And some of that gap is, right, there's first-time home buyers, right? They don't, like, they're just new to the, but there's still a big gap to overcome, 40%. There's a people that we can work. Working our database solves all these problems.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. So this was buyer and seller satisfaction, right? And look, people are satisfied. I mean, you look at it, that's 93% are very or somewhat on buyers, and it's literally 80%. It's 90% on sellers. So there you go, 93 and 90.
Congratulations, you're getting the job done.
Yeah, people are satisfied with what you're doing, which is again why I think you see high percentages of 88% use realtors. Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, 88% of the time. Yeah, this is why, because you're getting high satisfaction marks. And congratulations, that's a big deal. It's not a little deal. It's a big deal. How sellers found their agent, again, 41% referred, 26% previously used. So we're talking again.
67% is repeat and referral, right?
Repeat and referral.
So even more so with the sellers, that you have an opportunity to work your database to uncover them, find them, and list them.
So this, by the way, flies in the face. So think about this, because it said you have these high percentages of people that found their home or got information online, but then you turn around and you say, but how did they find 88% used real estate agents, and how did they find them? And the web is 5%.
Right.
It's 4%. Right. I mean, it's a very low number. Yeah. Which tells you get out and
people don't shop agents online. They have relationships or are open to having relationships with
In the absence of a realtor, they'll find their realtor through a property they're interested in.
Right.
And we're very familiar with that path. Your goal is to try to bypass that for the majority of your business. Yeah. Interviews, same thing. 77%.
Highest ever. One interview.
Yeah, one interview. And 13% they had two. So again, what is that? 90%? Talked to only two people? Yeah. There you go.
First.
Be first. That's why you lead generate, by the way. That's why you stay in contact. That's why you do a 36-touch program, Jay. We do those things because of those stats right there. And that is, we have to be top of the mind awareness. We have to be there in that moment, because they're not going to talk to lots of people. If a competent professional shows up and appears to be able to meet their needs, they're signing with them and they're moving on. And that's the end of that. They see no reason to go interview 2 or 3 people. This idea, you see these ads and they say, call us. We will find you an agent. No, you're not interested in interviewing 2 or 3 agents. No. They don't want to do it, right? That flies in the face of what actually happens. When they say, we're going to send you 2 or 3 agents for you to interview, and you're going, people don't want to do that.
No.
No, if a competent person shows up, they go, you know what, I'm good, I'm signing. Yes. Which means if you're the first one or the second, ask for the order.
Yeah.
because the likelihood of them signing is really high. What do they want? Well, they want you to sell their home within a specific time frame. Today, that's not a problem.
No.
Yeah, and help you get a competitive price today, that's not a problem, right? The representing them and helping them navigate through all this, that's a big deal. And it's complicated, right? Because without a realtor, most likely they're leaving money on the table.
A lot of sellers right now want their agent to help them navigate getting into their next home while they're selling their home. And if you can provide the answers for that, you've got a much better chance of working with them.
And if you look at why people hire, why sellers hire agents, reputation, honest and trustworthy, again, to me, again, it's all about knowledge. It's all about representing yourself to them in such a way that they feel comfortable that you're going to either know the answer or go get the answer and give it to them. And that, by the way, is what they want.
Yep.
Yeah. Compensation negotiation. So this survey simply has to do with, did you talk about commissions and were they negotiated? And this says real estate agents initiated the discussion of compensation around 44% of the time in 2020. Right? The client brought up the topic 23.
So
right?
a little more than 72% of the time, you're discussing it and it's proactive by one party or the other.
Okay,
yeah.
Let's just end it on that. That's exactly right. And I think that's right. I mean, I believe that compensation should be initiated by the agent 100% of the time. I believe you should explain how you get paid and the different charges that right, for different levels of service. And I believe that's what people want.
It's an opportunity to share your value proposition, folks. A lot of people don't understand what you're going to be doing for them. It's your opportunity.
Yeah, share what you'll do, share your variable pricing around all of that, and let them decide. Give them a choice. Absolutely. 89%, by the way, said they definitely or probably would use you again.
And 67% do. Again, there's a smaller gap on sellers, but it's still a gap.
I think that's actually good. Method used to sell the home, right? I said 88, sorry, 89%. Which again is unbelievable, right?
I think I was watching the FSBO number. I thought that might go higher, but I guess with COVID, they wanted an agent to help them navigate that. Yeah. Even though we had a hot market, they still want an agent to help them navigate the changing, how things are being sold.
A sign of the times is the last two columns: sold to a home buying company, sold through an iBuyer program. And you can tell that from a statistical standpoint, they're irrelevant.
Right.
At this moment in history, they're completely irrelevant. But those will be two areas that each year we're all going to be fascinated to see, is there traction around that?
Right.
Yeah. Incentives offered? Not really. I mean, 67% none. Home warranties, assistance with closing and repairs. Those are the three that show up. So these are
the last two slides, folks. We're at the finish line.
Yeah. So we regularly track the past. This has nothing to do with indicating the future, and of course commissions are always 100% negotiable, and they're determined behind closed doors between an agent and their potential client. This just gives you a sense of more about where income is, and you can see that it's on average.
It's been pretty stable on the seller side.
Yeah, the average pretty stable. Yeah. And on the buy side, it also has been fairly stable for the last...
almost the exact same percentage.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Yep.
And that's it, guys. Any wrap-up thoughts?
Well, thanks for hanging in there another 10 minutes. Yeah, I want to also thank, Ruben, Jim, Michelle, Owen, Caitlin, the team that makes really hard to comprehend things pretty and easy to understand. Yeah. So thank you for that.
Are we going to publish this?
Yes, the slide decks are going to be available if you were at Family Reunion on the platform. If you are watching it on Connect, it'll be available on KW Connect. So you can share this information with your clients.
All right. Well, Ruben, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Gary.
So this wraps up another year. So we're off to the races for 2021 and see what happens, right?
Yep. Thanks for joining us, folks.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.